destruction, illusion, restoration, conjuration, and I guess alteration. These are the 5 schools of magic that govern in Skyrim. However, legend tells of a lost 6th school of magic, one that embodies the Iowan know you to a sadistic degree. So to see what we lost, I go on a magical journey to the 3rd era when the spells were practiced, as today I will attempt to beat Oblivion Remastered with only Mysticism magic. So what exactly does Mysticism entail? It mostly became the catch-all magic school. It utilizes things like detect life, soul trap, telekinesis, and spell manipulation such as reflect and absorption. Since fast travel is a thing, we can't teleport like in Morrowind. Keeping the intro short because I like to ramble on about stupid things to pad out the runtime, my only rule is that the only spells I can use are Mysticism related, and that is it. No other spells or melee damage, so how will I be able to conquer this continent with no direct ways to deal damage while also breaking the game? Let's find out. Starting with the character creator, going with the good old Hierarchian Breton today. They start with the highest bonus to Mysticism, bonus to Magicka, and the racial bonus to resist magic 50 points will help out in the long run, more later. While making the sliders, I feel very negative today, much like my usual self-deprecation jokes, and honestly, I was not intending on making a muskrat, but here I am.
Let me see your face. You are the one from my dreams. Gods give me strength.
Also, in a previous video in my weird timeline that makes sense in my nonsensical mind, people got upset that I intentionally accidentally mixed up Kirk for Picard. Y'all need to remember, I intentionally bait for interactions. I'll make everyone upset and call Uriel Han Solo. Close enough. The tutorial plays out like normal. Because I'm playing on Baby's first hand-holding experience, I'm given the clairvoyant spell to show me the way to go, to guide me to my destination when I get lost. I tried matching to gain spell experience, but in the remaster, experience is dictated by spell cost, not by how many spells you cast. I don't fancy going from level 98 to 99 fighting the rats you fight in the first dungeon, so I will leave them be, and I am left alone to my own devices on getting out of the rat den. Some days I question what I could do if I had my own device to play with. During the autoscroller, I did rest my hand on a pile of logs, and I found out what happens when your wood is not secured. It tumbles down, and it crushes the poor innocent souls down below, like the Final Destination movie. That is not the worst part of the deal. A few goblins who were stalking me wanting my autograph, or so my ego tells me, they also tripped on the sticks and crushed themselves. That was entirely on them. Back with the crew, I talk to Han Solo, and I get to pick my birth sign. As much as I would love to pick the better birth signs, for this run to work, I require the tower. Not because I'm a horrible at Jenga, or I have a thing with the Arcana by which all is revealed, but the only way for me to get Reflect spell, and not doing most of the Shivering Isles, is by picking the tower. I sit around for the rest of the tutorial, letting the crew of the TARDIS protect the captain of the Moya. I doubt most of my audience is old enough to know where the Moya comes from. Eventually I'm tasked with protecting Han Solo, who dies at the end of The Force Awakens. I know spoilers, but let's face it, the entire sequel trilogy is just a cruddy remake of the original trilogy. I get to pick my class, and I'm going with some generic perks. Mysticism is a must, and I fill out the rest from there since nothing else really matters. I become a sewer rat scurrying for any crumbs of food while finally having a spell to call my own, and now I'm in the 2006, now 2025 world because timey is just wimey. My first order of business is exploiting businesses for money. I duped a few scrolls because at this point the first of the 2 patches came out, and I really should start recording these runs months in advance, and for my plan of work I sold everything I didn't need and bought some Mysticism spells from around town. One of my main objectives for the run is going to be getting to Mysticism 100, along with breaking the game for my own amusement. It doesn't take a soda-loving Brit to tell you, Oblivion is a perfectly balanced game with no glitches or exploits. Excluding the Fortify Restoration exploit or glitch or whatnot in Skyrim, I do think Oblivion is a more broken game than Skyrim, though not nearly as much as Morrowind. I traveled to Brazil and got me a telekinesis spell to see if I can subject myself to beating Oblivion with telekinesis. It's good for getting caught and reloading a save from curiosity, not so much for anything else. I did return to the big city and got me some Grand Soul Gems, mostly for not money related exploits or anything, but rather I'm going to want to show off how to be OP at level 1. Getting Grand Souls will be a pain in the ass, since all you will find in the wild are rats and wolves, nothing grand about them. But human souls are considered grand. I traveled to the southeast of Chad Hall to find the Dark Fissure, and do some rather illicit activities from the Mages Guild standpoint. I'm not in the guild, so f*** them. I can never tell when the Necromancer moon is out, so I waited until midnight to see if the moon is out. It wasn't, but the game wouldn't let me skip 4 days. I I returned to town to find out a conjurer was stalking me. Didn't go well for him. Secret Service agents are bad at judging characters by their character. After waiting several days for Pokemon cards to drop at the GameStop to beat the scalpers, who have been waiting out since I think the last Pokemon card drop to be honest, the moon is out, I put Grand Soul Gems in the coffin, cast Soul Trap, and they turned into Black Souls. Seems like quite hidden knowledge, you actually find out about this cheeky little trick during the Mage's Quest line. I still say necromancy should be legal. Make paste, not waste. Or something. With my gems converted, next up is gathering a few souls to doom them into a fork-like lifestyle for the rest of eternity. Being an Elder Scrolls character must really suck. My first soul, like the Grim Reaper I am, is at Fort Ash. I intentionally let myself get mugged because I think going into a dimly lit alley at 1 in the morning alone is a safe idea. I led the bandit into town, ignored the reminder to give Han Solo's necklace to Joffrey, and let the police settle the disturbance with a bunch of arrows, and I had my first soul. Also, I thought about duping the soul gem, but the game told me it's not cool to cheat. Okay, if I have to play fair, then I guess I have to, even at the cost of many innocent civilians. First idea that came to mind is to talk to a madman about the conspiracy theories he saw on TikTok and is now convinced the world is out to get him. I put his worries and more importantly his aluminum foil supply at ease and did investigating myself. I didn't do much, just talked to a few NPCs, Glarthir skipped on our scheduled meetings, and when he tells me to become his Dark Brotherhood assassin, I tell him no, so he took it upon himself to do the killings. I politely woke up the first target, and they have a little spat. Glarthir was able to kill Bernadette after the soul trap ran out, so I had to reload. Second reality, she escaped the house, and he was gunned down in the streets. Not as many souls as I would have liked, but one soul is one soul. While I'm still in the prep work mode, and mind you I'm about a fifth of the way through the recording, I paid a visit to the giant tower erect in the sky for all to see, not compensating for anything. I'm so horrible at lockpicking, I was level 50 in security before I was let inside. Yeah, this place is the most overpowered place in Oblivion. It feels good to use the funny piece of plastic with 16 digits and 3 funny numbers on the back. I bought some candles for a lovely night, and when I tried creating a basic reflect spell, I didn't have the magicka or skill requirements to cast it. I took a few nights sleep and powered myself up to level 5, dumping everything into intelligence so I can perceive myself as being the smartest man alive, or at least ego trip everyone into thinking I am. I also crafted the most expensive spell I can at my skill level, and casted it in the big city until I hit Mysticism 50. While I was in town, I did buy all the upgrades to the tower, and unlocked enchanting and spellcrafting. Normally you have to complete half of the Mage's Guild to do this stuff, but, you know, funny credit cards. I crafted a basic reflect spell, 50 points for 2 seconds. I was going to create some reflect potions or enchantments, but neither would work out in the long run. Mostly because I'm very lazy. I can't do any short-term planning to save my life. I still don't know what to eat for lunch, or remember if I ate breakfast. Oop, tummy rumbled, must have forgot again. Another piece of the puzzle where I'm missing one piece, and will disturb me for a long time, is the spell reflection. I thought since I had the reflect spell, I could enchant a piece of jewelry. I'm not very bright, and did not think that far ahead. So my entire reasoning for Grand Soul Gems was thrown out the window. Out of my pure impertinence towards myself. And no, I didn't go for the chameleon option. That would be safer if I decided to beat this game on master difficulty with 1 HP. With the need for more magic, I was able to get a few more Z's to my name, now I'm Orpheolus, without much more magic. I don't want to level myself up anymore because of the level scaling, and with my cruddy basic reflect spell, I couldn't reflect much damage without taking a beating. I took a few bandits to a highway, all for more souls, and really at this point, I was really struggling with the build. I'm also beating myself for only doing 3 minutes of research for this run. Well, with myself out of ideas, I didn't have many to begin with, I figure if I'm struggling with basic bandits, saving the town of Kvatch from a Daedric invasion sounds like a much easier time. Spoiler alert, I really should have utilized the vacuum in my skull to power level my Mysticism to 100 to save what little hair I have left on my forehead. Well, if I'm not going to be able to beat up the enemies, I can always employ an unpaid intern to do the dirty work while I sit back in my office chair and do jack all. He did a good job at clearing out the intro party, but when I went into the main tower, everyone followed us in. Knowing fate doth not smile upon him, I just abandoned him to his fate and claimed the life insurance for myself and bucket up the tower. The other reason I said I should have power leveled Mysticism more is because there is one required fight in this gate, and is like the only required fight in any Oblivion gate to be honest. The smooth brain of much further in the past me thought 50% reflection is good enough. Judging by the slivers of health tickling down, 50% reflection is actually not very good. and I went through a solid portion of my healing supplies just to come out on top. If I can't work harder, I can always make someone else work harder on my behalf, or so my days as a lazy manager has told me, and I can't manage to land the finishing blow. Fine by me, I grab the key from the charred corpse, and I ignore everything else on my ascent up the pillar, and I try to save scum the disco ball for hopefully a reflect enchantment, only for me to add one more minute to my lack of preparation pre-run, and find out you can't get a reflection from the sigil stones. And I don't fancy grinding to 20 for a mundane ring. Okay, plan gamma. Back to the sunshine of a dark autumn twilight, I remembered finally that Joffrey exists, and I should probably talk to him first and foremost. Can't do much sequence breaking. Also, I know the reason why I went to Kvatch to begin with. And then I hand over Han Solo's necklace to Joffrey. Inside the courtyard, I help the guard clear out the place by being a pretty distraction, since I can do jack all at this point. Once I bask in the efforts of others, I convince the priest to join a lunatic and return to the priory to clear out more of the Mythic Dawn agents. They see the incursion as an attack on their livelihood. I see it as a way for me to get more Grand Souls. Once I was stocked up, I let Joffrey figure out his problems. He's a grown adult after all, and together we travel to Skyhaven Temple to let the son of Han Solo, Mr. Bean, make a speech like a true czar. With my ego deflated, and knowing I have much more challenging tribulations in my near future, my top priority is going to be rounding out my build. The most important thing is going to be putting fashion at the forefront, meaning as a sweater enthusiast, buying the latest sweater, and also buying some jewelry. You would think the first place for me to check out would be a jewelry shop, but since I have a naturally low intelligence stat, that was the last place for me to check out. Mostly me forgetting that there's a jewelry store in town. With my attire secured, I returned to my tower and enchanted most of my clothing with a fortified magicka. I will need to have enough magic to cast my plan in motion. With 340 magicka to my name, I can now go big with my spells, only for me to be reminded I am but a scrub and need 100 mysticism to be able to do anything, really. While in the original Oblivion, the best way to power level spells is to cast the cheapest spell over and over, but in the remaster, the best way is to cast the most expensive spell, which I do at my skill level of pleb, watching soldiers sleep while I detect their life essences and squalor until I hit level 75, only to return to the tower to create a higher tier spell. Not wanting to be labeled a creep once again, I get enough dirty looks every day. I just spam my spells in the basement of my pay-to-win tower until I finally become a master in Mysticism. Well, sure, I could have done the Master Mysticism quest. I forgot. Then again, I'm about as bright as the Gale without our UESP website pulled up. Once I'm a master of my ego, I return to my game breaker and crafted a perfect reflect spell for 15 seconds, which is most of my magic bar, and it will get me through the remainder of my journey. And I also crafted a reflect spell for those mages, though I don't think it works very well. And with that, my entire build is rounded out. Barring my magic replenishments, I bought some magic potions and supplied myself for the long journey ahead, mostly to not waste my time waiting around for a minute before I could reflect again. With this one magical thing known as beating the game, I figure I should probably get the main story back on track, and really the game will speed up at this point. I tried to goad the Mythic Dawn assassin into punching me, but he has beef with Boris Johnson, even though I was there for Han Solo's assassination. I began book shopping by talking to a lizard, then going to the one store in town that sells the forbidden banned book section that will cause some parents to hard clutch their pearls, even though they read more prudent novels in bed, and we know where those books are stashed. I spelled Gwyneth what happens in the book, and he throws it in my face. I read The Half-Blood Prince before it was released, because that's what happens when you're friends with a librarian. So knowledge is indeed power. Inside the sewers, I can finally test out my Uno reverse card on the crabs, and it gets results. For the mechanics of Reflect, is essentially the damage of the attacks of the enemy multiplied by the reflect strength, then afterwards any difficulty multiplier is applied. It's quite funny watching the weak vermin maul themselves to death. The sucky part about Reflects is that arrows are immune to reflection, so if I want to go through the 1 HP challenge, Stealth Archer will be a requirement. The remainder of the sewer crawl wasn't very interesting. Boris ended up doing most of the work because I'm not really that much of a threat, and when engaging with the meeting, I figure since I'm the most intellectual, barring the numerous spelling and grammar mistakes in the script, I should do the talking. Boris has major virgin energy, so he ends up getting caught. During the fight, most of the attention was on him. I was just a casual onlooker. Even at one point, I stood in the middle of the two, wishing for a peaceful outcome, where my aura was enough to stop both in their tracks. Or they were staring at my deformed face, who knows. They both got back at a passionate dance with one another, and eventually Boris was struck down, leaving just Raven and me. Raven has a pathetic 8% reflect ring. I used my 100 reflect, and Raven plucked his own eyes out forevermore. I got my reading materials, touch the neon lights giving myself second-degree burns, and begin my hike out to the base. Thankfully, there wasn't much on my journey, just some bandits not responding well when they were asking questions, along with playtime with the wolf not going very well. Inside the cavern, they asked me if I wanted to join the cult. I have my own cult of personality, so I made a harrowing play at beating the guards at their own game with their own game. The easiest way to win at chess is by eating the other person's king. Checkmate. Stomach. I continued purification by responding with these new members' likes by asking them to subscribe. Sadly, it didn't go well for them. At one point, I started to run low on my magic potions. Even duping wouldn't work. I get it, game. I'm supposed to be legit by turning a run into a pacifist run to make things less entertaining. And the door outside is locked, so I guess I have to clear out the place legit. I ran into the big room, and instead of watching Mankar make some grand speech, I beelined it to the book and added it to my collection right under his nose. As for the escape, I got lost at a few points because I tend to not remember what's going on. And with an entire cult of cultists after my decrepit ass, I am a bit under pressure. Eventually I found my way out with the entire chapter of religious nutjobs after me. I just want to record my videos in peace, not be interrupted to hear the words of our Lord and Savior Todd Howard. Back at Cloud Ruler Temple, I turned to my library book that is 12 years overdue because I found out my bookshelf gathering dust, and next up I need to rat out the spies. They were just hanging outside of Bruma and disguising their plot as town efficiency. They were unaware of my idea of being efficient is by leading them to the guards and letting the police state solve my problems because I have the money to do so. With the spies fried, I plundered their basements of snow for any more evidence, and I returned to the TARDIS to get the next quest, and that's hunting down a Daedric weapon. I returned to the Imperial Market ready to do some shopping, when I was stopped by even more agents of mayhem. Much like the rest of the Saints Row fandom, the group was cast out for being a boring looter-shooter, and I grabbed some blow dust, and right after I finished my transaction, the pendulum of my mind, that I wonder some days if it's bipolar, decided to instead do Vermina's quest. I mean, I do have a leftover black soul gem, and getting one of them is a giant pain in the ass. I commune with the prince dreaming of my beautiful face to grab an orb from a nearby tower. I have already explored this dungeon in a previous video, and to not waste anyone's time, let alone my starving editor whom I refuse to pay in anything but imaginary currency, I just go through the back door, grab a magic 8-ball, and return to Vermina to get my reward, continued existential torment of my dreams, and questioning who I really am in so many facets, and return to the Pridwin to begin the next quest. And of course that quest being a grand babysitting expedition. I have such a superior physique, and not wanting to ruin my expensive 20 septum attire I got at Goodwill, I pretend I got at a luxury designer store, I let my backup do the dirty work. Or that my face has already been punched in good, and the data figured out it doesn't need to be punched in anymore. Never once did anything consider attacking me. I just had my character look onward in a rather callous manner. The tower was mostly uneventful, and with smart use of waiting and the AI not focusing on one target, the guards could eventually do their jobs, and in the final room, I played with a big fall of fire, and all the guards came out alive. Who knew the secret of saving everyone is doing absolutely nothing and having a few levels under your belt. With one town saved, and also because I know I can fly through the remainder of the run in probably an hour, I figure I could waste some time in getting some help for the Bruma siege. I thought it would add one soldier to the mix, not replace a Bruma guard with someone with a month's more training than them. Since I have gone through numerous Oblivion gates in my day, and acrobatics break these gates, especially with my indomitable physique, I can clear out these gates in probably a minute. Kinda goes to show how short these places are when you aren't placed in meaningless combat. I extended out my short arms in an act of mercy, and helped out the lovely folks in Coral. Sure, the gate does have some of the best bows and such in the game, but God Howard told me I'm not allowed to play with dangerous toys. Breville's gate can be shortened by hopping around a gate, and partway up I realized I failed to tie my own shoes and met the sidewalk. At least there is a massive indent on my face, so my nose doesn't have to be twisted in 4 different directions. While waiting for the Count to come out from his slumber, I was visited by some wannabe assassins. I could have probably redirected any complaints towards the establishment to my suggestion box disguised as a paper shredder, but the Count solved my problems for me, and probably the only thing his arse has probably done in his life. I gave him a new footstool, then I started the Leyland gate. Given my intense intellectual prowess, the first idea that came to my spherical orb in my headspace is to take a hot lava bath. Me and having health potions hotkeyed helped out, and then I went to the first cavern I saw, and upon following it to the end, I ended up right back at the entrance. Back on the mainland, I parkoured my way up to the main tower, where I ignored my psycho fence, desperate to get the attention of a psychopath, and pulled out another flaming ball and let my cult of personality pile onto me. With Lade Wind sending one person to their death, I figure I should be good for the big battle, so I guess back to the main story. Wanting to cut down on backtracking, I decided to get Miss Karkin done now. On my way there, a bear found out how unbearable social media involving birds has become, and inside the platform of my choice, I started the dungeon of the Terminally Online, where I retort bad ideas back upon themselves and using my drones to add fuel to the non-existent fire. Thankfully, there's at least a bunch of welcome stones here, which will prove invaluable with the paradise fights. Eventually, the Bone Boys started to become Bow Boys, which I can't do anything to, so I booked it past everyone. I grabbed the flashlight as a substitute for the roll of toilet paper MacGuffin, and the CEO of the rival company comes out to play. I tried using a reflect spell, but it works weirdly. It reflects? Sure, but I don't see it doing any damage. I cut my losses, tell the CEO I'll be sending my army of lawyers for the patent lawsuit I might have stolen, and booked it out of the propaganda botland. Once I emerged outside in the fresh, heavily polluted air that smells like my bank account looking fatter, I had to deal with the little gremlins smacking themselves with their axes. YouTube does not like the S word, and I'm not talking about shit. So, to utilize Zoomer lingo, they viciously and unequivocally removed their life essence from their own bodies, freeing themselves from this mortal coil. Or I guess unalived works too. Something I don't know if I mentioned in my previous videos, the entire time loop of my recording and scripting with short-term memory loss, but every time I leave Miss Karkin land, enemies are always after me, and trying to get them to de-aggro is a waste of time. So much so in my escape of the dungeon, I ended up having to sprint all the way to Coral, just so I can fast travel to Coral. Since I was infested with brain rot, I paid a visit to the church to cure myself, and they have doggos. Maybe going to church isn't so bad, if only half those who pretend to go to church would actually listen to what they preach. And the last destination of this distraction, because I like pretty colors, is Torna. My character just looks at the losers smacking themselves in discontent, imps included. Pathetic. Before entering the dungeon, I had to deal with a hero. Sure, they claim they are the hero of the people, but you don't go around smacking around randos just because they look at you funny. That's my job, thank you very much. As for the dungeon proper, the ghosts only seem to cast frost spells, which they are immune to. Translated from Orph mental gymnastics to regular speech, I can't do jack shit to them. So my dive into our rescue is a short-lived one, since I need to deal with the undead blades, which can be defeated. I don't waste a lot of time here. I mean, if you skip out in combat, the dungeons are super short. One blade dragging around a giant sword in a bloody room really feels like a Dark Souls encounter, until you return the Soulsborne damage scaling right back to sender. The rest of the dungeon goes by without a hitch, because self-destructing cars lack hitches, and driving PlayStation 1 trucks would get me laughed out of Iowa. We only drive affordable trucks here as they drive down the highway 10 to 15 miles over the speed limit. Eventually all the ghosts can haunt me in the afterlife. I grab the plot armor and return to the son of Han Solo to begin the final few missions. Glad to know they think of the fan service for the actors. I talk to the Countess and let her know I got help from a few provinces, which will hopefully be good enough for my lazy standards, and begin the big battle. I was very worried I would be down a few men for the battle. Nah, they were still putting on their big boy pants. I was super nervous about this battle, and the sole reason I got aid from a few cities. Since my build revolves entirely around reflecting enemy attacks, they have to actually attack me. And they don't even pay attention to me, and as an egomaniac, this hurts me greatly. All I can do is just pray the soldiers can protect Han Solo Jr. long enough for the big gate to open. Even the frames were going after Martin. Eventually the big gate opens up, which I waste no time and go on right on in. Since this level is on a time limit before the big doomsday machine of doom invades Tamriel, I waste no time in pleasantries, and I sprint my way to the inside. I have gone through this tower many times before, and I'm used to being a pacifist in this location. I did come across my biggest enemy, capable of stopping the hero, that being a locked door. I'm just having the worst time unlocking these doors, and eventually I say hell with it, say no you to the sigil keeper, and pull out the great ball of fire, destroying the machine, and double checking the difficulty, and saving the day. Sadly, there is no after party. I have no need for preparation for the final dungeon. I'm well stocked up on potions, so I rush into my reception of heaven. I don't feel like spending a lot of time here because I have a lot of hell ahead of me. I redirected any insults at me back to the sender, and the flame attacks sure tickle, but it's nothing I'm afraid of. I put on the bands of thinking I'm a chosen one, or so my ego thinks so, and I rush through the insides. I don't want to waste a lot of time here. I ignored all the enemies, skip out on the roast last minute so I don't look weak. It ignored everyone in the insides of Skulldolphin. Eventually I'm back out in the fresh air, and I book it to the final boss. Instead of listening to some speech on how he is going to make Tamriel great again via giant flaming demon, I repeatedly picked his pockets, and it seems he has no use for material items. So much so his VA changes. As for the most tedious fight I've had in Oblivion thus far, the reflect spell doesn't seem to reflect every spell, mostly just one, I could try to clear out the kids, but they are always respawning. Plan B for the fight, trying to get the kids to kill Mankar since the AI is pretty unbright. They weren't really into the friendly fire, but Bruma did fall to her death. I was thinking all hope would be lost until I realized I spent way longer than the devs were intending for this fight. Mankar ran out of charges for his staff, so he had to resort to good old fisticuff. Meaning, I can now reflect his attacks back to him properly. Sure, I had to deal with a few more indents on my face, but at least the health bar is starting to tick down. Eventually everyone piles onto my location, I activate my trap card, and everyone finally tumbled down. I grab the amulet and other goodies, try sitting on the throne but getting paralyzed in the process, and I returned Han Solo's jewelry to Han Solo's son, and now he can fly the TARDIS. And to wrap up the run, Martin became the Emperor just in time for a Daedric invasion to cause ruckus in the streets. And for this defense mission, one of the Dromora came after me, meaning I can actually do something for once. I waste no time in the streets, I sped ran the final mission in a quick-like manner, get a glimpse of evil, watch on as a dragon roast Dagon, and get stoned because it's legal in this state, and I have successfully beat Oblivion Remastered with only Mysticism magic. Mysticism is an okay class of magic. It was fun to reflect magic back to sender, but honestly, I think Mysticism was the weakest class of magic. Mostly because all the main spells Mysticism has, Life Detection, Reflect, Soul Trap, can all be replicated in enchantments, so instead of investing a full magic bar into reflecting for a few seconds, you could just enchant your gear and become immune to all melee attacks, and you can use your magic resource for better spells like Restoration, which is beyond overpowered in this game. Overall, I did have fun. I'm glad I went down the exploit route to show the full power of Mysticism, and only at its best can Mysticism be fun. Funny how nearly every Oblivion run evolves into finding some game breaker and riding it to its extreme, but most Elder Scrolls are about as balanced as a house of cards in a hurricane. Hopefully you enjoy this run, and a special thank you to all the patrons and YouTube members who always reflect any harm back to the sender. Anyways, if you liked the video, be sure to drop a like, subscribe for more masochism and any other ways to torture myself, leave them down below. This has been Orpheolus, and I'll see you on the next one.